Okay, so as we said, we're looking at the writing task 1, charts without a timeline, and we're going to look at planning, we're going to look at structure, and we're going to look at the kind of language that the examiners are looking for. Okay, we're going to look at 2 types of chart. So we're going to use this one first of all. And then we'll use a separate one that we're going to actually write a model answer from. So have a good look at this example at the bar chart. Yeah, very common static chart question. And we're going to look at what you need to look at before you start writing. It's quite easy to make some mistakes with accuracy, to just look at it very quickly and think, okay, I know what's going on, I'm going to start writing, and actually you haven't really paid enough attention to each part. So you need to read the question very carefully, you need to read the title very carefully, also the axes. One of the main mistakes that people make is they don't look at the measurement on the axis correctly. They use percentages when it's not percentages, or they use thousands when it's millions. So you do need to spend a little bit of time just looking at all of that information and making sure you 100% understand the chart before you start actually writing your answer. Same with all the other types of task 1, the map, the process. Don't start writing until you're 100% sure of what you are looking at. So we're going to look at a few questions, true, false questions. So read those, everything that's on there very, very carefully. And then I want you to tell me if these statements are true or false, okay? Yeah, we're looking at a specific one type here to look at the information. Then the one that we're going to look at to write the model answer is a static chart, okay? So if you look at that first sentence, is that a good description of the bar chart that we're looking at? Okay, oh, hi Mohammed, how are you doing? So what is incorrect about that information there? What are we actually looking at? All right, that it is false. What exactly is false about the information? Okay. Yeah, well, okay, the traveling abroad is false. So we're looking at immigration. We're not looking at emigration. So it's basically the exact opposite of that. Okay. What about this one? The number of workers immigrating into Australia. Okay, I'm just giving everybody a chance to, right? Yeah, absolutely true. So we're talking about workers, we're talking about immigration, we've got the right time frame, so that's 100% accurate. Okay. How about the next one? Think about this one carefully. Okay, yeah, Mustafa's gone for false. So why is that false? What is incorrect about that statement? Okay, very good, Laura. Okay, very good. That's exactly right. The task states that it's workers and it's not all immigration. So there could be students, there could be other types of immigration. So you're talking specifically about workers. If you wrote that in your introductory sentence, you'd be losing marks in terms of accuracy, because that's not an accurate statement based on this bar chart. All right, what about the next statement? Okay, we've got about, don't worry, there's not that many trick questions here. Is this strict? Yeah, we're comparing permanent settlers and temporary workers. So it would be good in your introduction to say that this is comparing two types of immigrants. Yeah? Okay, what about the next question? So we're looking at the first year in this case. What do we think? Okay, we've got a big mix of true and false there. If you think it's false, why do you think it's false? Okay, Isam, very good. You get the first prize. This is what I was talking about at the beginning, not reading the measurements, okay? Assuming that they're talking about the percentage of the population. It's actually thousands, so it's 40,000 workers. It's not 40%. So you may be thinking, well, that's really obvious to look at the axes, but trust me, a lot of people get it wrong and they do make mistakes with the measurements. So do please be careful with that. Yeah. All right, how about this one? So now we're looking at 1995. So the number of foreign workers in Australia. Okay, Vivo's going for false. Other people are going for true. Getting quite a lot of disagreement here. If you think it's false, why do you think it's false? If you said false, why do you think that that is not correct information? Okay, very good. Mustafa, again, you're very much on top. Okay, and Abdullah, it's not the total of number of foreign workers in Australia, it's the number of people who entered Australia in that year. Okay, so there is a difference between that. I know these seem like small things, but you are going to lose a lot of marks for task achievement if you're not accurate with your information. And some of these charts can be quite complicated in what they are talking about. Indeed, Selena. Oh, yeah, so you do really need to be careful. Okay, have a look at the next one. So we're looking here, temporary foreign workers. We're looking at 1992, just under 15,000. Okay, this is all completely correct. We've got the measurement correct. We've got the immigration aspect correct. We've got the worker aspect correct. So all of the information is exactly right. Okay, and the last one. So now we're looking at the last year. So there's a comparison here between the temporary workers and the permanent settlers. So fewer temporary workers, if we're looking at 2001. Okay, good. It's the other way around. Okay, so again, you know, just be very, very careful with your accuracy and be particularly careful with your measurements and with the very specific data. It's quite easy to write something which is not accurate information. And that is a key part of task achievement. Okay, you can write a beautiful task one, all the language is fabulous, but if your data isn't accurate, you're still going to get a low score at the end of the day. Okay, so that was to have a look at the accuracy. This is the chart that we are going to do our model answer with. So again, you know, look at all of the information that is given there. What are we talking about? What are the measurements? What are the different categories that we are looking at? Okay, so we've got a pie chart. So now we are talking about percentages. Okay. So standard structure, this is true for all of the task one writing. So we need our introduction, our overview, then you want your body, but it's always a good idea to divide the body up into a couple of paragraphs. It's just easier for the examiner to read. It looks better, helps you organize your thoughts more as well. You can, if you want, put the overview at the end. That's perfectly acceptable. But it is very, very important to get that overview in. It's one of the key aspects of task achievement. So it's quite good to actually get it done first, and then you know you've completed it and you don't have to worry about, you know, forgetting or running out of time at the end. Okay. So we're going to look at each of those parts of the structure in turn, and then we're also going to look at some of the language that we are using. So the introductory sentence, simply a paraphrase of the question. Don't need to do any more than that. It should be one sentence. You don't want to put any detail in it, but you don't want to copy the task question either, because if you do that, it's not included in your word count, and you may think you've got 150 words and actually you haven't got 150 words. So be very careful about that. Having said that, you don't need to spend hours and hours paraphrasing every single word everywhere. There's sometimes I'm finding people are over paraphrasing in their writing, and it ending up saying things that are quite awkward, or in fact actually just wrong, because they're so desperate to find a paraphrase or a synonym for everything that's written. So, you know, don't go crazy with the paraphrasing, but those kinds of words like shows, various, you know, proportion, these are the kinds of general academic words where you can use synonyms, you can use paraphrase. Mohammed, you're 100% right. It's also not just about synonyms. Think about active, passive voice. Think about changing the word order, the word formation. Those are all different ways of paraphrasing. It's not always just a case of this word matches this word. Okay. And as I said, don't put any detail into your introductory sentence. It's a very general statement of the topic. So in the topic, we've got the chart. So again, here we are looking at synonyms. What could we write in the in our introductory sentence? Okay, very good, Mohammed. The pie chart. Okay, this pie chart. No, it's just a small change, but it shows that you understand that you can use both of those. And then clear one that we always use. Okay, illustrates, represents. Yeah. Any other options? Depicts is also quite a nice one. Yeah, but illustrates works perfectly. Make sure you got the double L. And then here we've got proportion. So another way of saying that would be, okay, very good. So percentage, the number, any of those kinds of words would work very well. Good. And here we've got immigrants, and then later on we have a participle. We've got working. So rather than saying that, how could we change that? Perhaps changing the word order. Yeah, foreign workers, people immigrating. Okay, those immigrating, Fadi, that's a really good way of doing it. Yeah. We went for workforce. So we're using a noun rather than using the participle. Okay. Yeah, immigration, Sneha, that would be another way of using immigration rather than immigrant. Immigrating, so, you know, mixing up the word formation works really, really well. Then perhaps rather than saying various regions and countries, what might we put? Okay, yeah, nations works very well, Fada, or different instead of various. A variety of, that works very well. We've actually gone for saying that the actual number rather than various. So again, it's just mixing it up a little bit. And then we're just going to keep that the same. Okay, it's the country, it's the year. You know, don't stress about trying to express that in some other way, like in down under or Oceania. It's just going to get very confusing, and it's not necessary. Okay, so one sentence, paraphrase of the question using all those different ways of paraphrasing that we looked at. Okay, but don't overstress the paraphrasing. So now we come to the overview. The overview is really critical when it comes to your task achievement. You have to have a clear overview. You have to, which means it needs to be in a separate paragraph, that you need to begin it with a specific linking phrase, which shows that it's the overview. And also you have to make sure that you have separated out the main trends, which is the overview, and the detail, which is the body. So if there's any kind of mixing of patterns and detail, that's when you're going to lose marks. Okay, you need to keep those totally and utterly separate. Okay, so find the key points. What do you really want to talk about? Usually the biggest number and the smallest number is very important to include. Similarities, differences, anything that's an exception to a rule is really important. Yeah, things that you can group together. You know, there's not that many categories here, so we can talk about all of the categories individually if we want, or we can group them. But you do sometimes get very, very complex tables with a lot of numbers. And when that happens, you really need to group them together. You can't talk about every category separately. You know, that's going to be 400 words. It's going to be very confusing. So you really need to, again, spend a bit of time looking at the information. How can I group that? What numbers stand out? You know, what's particularly high? What's particularly low? What doesn't follow the same pattern as the majority? Okay, so let's have a look at this. So the majority of people, yeah, I think some of you have already put that down, come from Europe. But another rather large number is what? Yeah, Asia. And you could also include New Zealand there. So, you know, they're definitely looking quite different to the other ones. Then everything else is a very small number, and it's a very similar number. So we could group those together. They're not really that important. You know, so grouping is really an important thing to do with the static charts. So how do we need to begin our overview? Okay, very good. Mustafa and Mohammed, overall. Don't need to put anything else. It's a standard one. It's not going to lose you marks. The fact that it's standard, just keep it the same, okay? In general is also possible, but overall always works. Okay, so, and then we need like a reporting phrase. So what's missing? Okay, very good. It's clear from the chart. So really important in the overview and also through the rest of the task one to use these kind of reporting phrases. We can see that, it can be seen that, it is clear that, it's remarkable that, those kind of, it's evident that, Joeria, that works really well as well. Okay, so what's the missing word here? Remember, we're talking about Europe. Yes, the majority of immigrant workers came from Europe, okay? And again, we're mixing up the language from the task and from the introductory sentence. So we've actually got 3 different ways of saying it now. Okay, so that's the majority. Then we go on to look at our next one. So made up a significant proportion. Okay, Durga, that works very, very well. Or percentage, either of those will work absolutely fine. You need to use the past tense because it says 1991 in the title. Okay, so again, that's something you need to be very careful with. Sometimes these static charts are from a specific year in the past. Sometimes they're just a general one, there's no timeline, and then it would be in the present. So that is going to make a big, big difference to how you write your answer. Okay. So they made up a significant percentage, and then we're going to compare them to the other countries. Okay, very good, Manuela. While, whereas. Okay, and then we're just putting the others together because they're not really very important in this case. Okay, so we've gone from the highest, we've got the highest, we've got the others ones that are significant, and then there are some others which are not particularly significant. Yeah, okay. So the reporting phrases are in the present, but the data you talk about in the past if your chart is related to the past. Okay, you've got to make the distinction between those two things there. Okay, remember, if you use something like however or on the contrary or conversely, great phrases, but they're linking phrases, so they are going to start a new sentence. You can't use them to combine two sentences together. Okay, so that would affect your cohesion score. But yes, so we are linking our ideas together, and we are using a logical process here for the overview. Okay, so now we move on. We've got our introductory sentence, we've got our overview. We need to now go into the details. So this is where we're going to put all our figures. This is where we're going to talk about all of the different categories. So we need to divide it up logically. And we need to have key patterns that we're focusing on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's only one way of organizing your body paragraphs. What you need to do is to decide how you want to divide them up, and then just make sure you follow that. Don't start one way and then switch to something else halfway through. That's going to get very, very confusing. So if you look at this example that we're looking at now, what could be two possible camps, two groups that you could look at? Okay, Mustafa, that would work very well. So basically you're dividing between the larger numbers and the smaller numbers. Any other ways that you might want to divide up this? Any thoughts? Okay, I know that, well, that's possible. Regions would, you know, in some cases that works as well. Okay, so the first one is exactly as Mustafa said. So we put all the high numbers together in one paragraph, and then we put all the low numbers together in another paragraph. I think that's probably the most logical. However, you could put the highest and the lowest, because they're the ones that stand out, and then all the ones in the middle. Okay, I don't think that, you know, that's not going to work so brilliantly in this case, because we've got a lot of very small numbers, but it is a possible one, and sometimes you have a big number and a small number, and then everything's grouped together in the middle. So, you know, you really need to look at what's going to be the most logical way of dividing it up, and what's going to make it easy for you to write it clearly and to have a good progression. Okay. I'd say moving from, Shirin, rather than, I wouldn't say moving forward. Okay, so let's look at this in a bit more detail. So again, as I was saying before, with the static chart, sometimes you have a lot of numbers. So you do need to just be selective. What are the ones that stand out? And you have to include the numbers. So basically, and this is true with both the timeline graphs and the static charts, you've got two things you need to include. One is the language. So in this case, it's going to be comparison language, fractions, and the other one is the exact data, so the exact figures. If you have the language and no data, you will lose marks. If you have the data and no language, you will also lose marks. So you've got to combine the two of them together. Okay, that is really, really important in the body. And make sure you use linkers. So not just linking phrases, they're great, but also things like this and these, grammatical structures which help you link, so conjunctions, ing forms, you know, these are all really good ways of giving yourself a nice logical progression through and making it easy for the examiner to see the links between the different pieces of information. Okay. So before we go on to write out our body paragraphs, pie charts are almost always in percentages, and many of the other static charts can be in percentages as well. You also sometimes get percentages in the process question. So it's very important to have a variety of language related to that. It's very easy just to write out percentages. I could do that even if I didn't understand a word of another language. So using fractions, using ratios is going to show that you can manipulate the language. Okay, that's what the examiners are really looking for. So yes, as you've already said, 1/10 is 10%. How about the next one? Okay, very good. So we can also use ratios, so 1 in 5. The next one would be, okay, very good, 33%. 3 out of 4. Yeah, be careful that, that's 75%, yeah, 3 out of 4. Just over 60%. Okay, very good, 66%. The next one, it's got a 1 that, yeah, 33%. Okay. And then we have a quarter, yeah. Next one would be, okay, very good, DA, so yeah, that's 66%. The next one would be 25%, so another way of saying a quarter. Then the next one is, sorry, yeah, 75%. And then we have another ratio, okay, good, 66%. Now we're back to fractions. So this fraction would be, yep, 20%. Just over 30%. Okay, very good. And then 1 in 10. Okay, good. So we've got fractions, we've got ratios. One thing to bear in mind, be very careful, ratios like 1 in 10, you can only use with countable nouns, okay? Sorry. Sorry. Oh dear.
It's okay, Angela, just take a moment to catch your breath. I know how difficult that is. It happens to me a lot as well. Guys, while Annalise getting some water, would you like to ask me any questions when we'll come back in a moment? Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm okay now. Sorry about that.
It happens to the best of us, including me.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Thank you, Lion. So we have the fractions and we have the ratios. So just remember that, you know, you can only use the ratios with countable nouns, okay? So 1 in 10 people, 1 in 10 countries. But if you're talking about production or generation or something like that, then you can only use the fractions, okay? It's going to be okay now. And if you look at the last row down at the bottom, it's also really good to use approximate language, okay? This is another way of showing that you can manipulate the language, you can play with the language. So things like almost, approximately, roughly, just under, just over. Those are really good expressions to use as well, okay? Okay, so they're just other ways of explaining percentages, Si, and it shows that you can use the language in a more interesting way. You're not relying just on the numbers. Okay. So let's have a look. Let's write these body paragraphs. So we've actually done it for you. It's all written out. And what we're going to do is we're going to match the gaps to the words there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the majority of foreign workers came from Europe. Okay. And then we go into our details. So number 2. Okay, exactly, nearly 2/3. So we've got the approximate language and we've got the fraction as well. So much better than just saying 62%. Okay. So there we've got the language and we've got the figure as well. All right, what about number 3? Okay, the second largest. So we're moving from largest downwards, always a very good way of doing the figures. All right, and they represented just under, okay, very good, a 1/5. So again, we're not writing the percentage, we're using a fraction and we're using approximate language and we're giving the exact information. And then we move down to New Zealanders, the third group, and they made up, okay, a 1/10, almost a 1/10, which was the third largest group, exactly. Okay, so again, we've got the language and we've got the figures there. So which tense are we using in those verbs? Okay, good. So remember, it's from 1991. All of the data needs to be in the past simple, okay? There's not really ever going to be a situation where you use past continuous when you're talking about charts. So, and do be consistent, because sometimes you get quite a lot of, mixing between past and then it goes to present, then it goes back to past. So just be careful to be consistent throughout, okay? So rather than using were all the time, how else can we talk about the figures? I think we've got DA's already got made up. What else can we use instead to talk about to introduce the actual figure? Okay, very good, Romain. So represented, made up. Yes, Mohammed, accounted for is another good one to use. Amounted to. So again, just make sure that you're not using were all the time and that you're not using the same verbs. Try and get a good mix, okay? And what are we using there in terms of approximate language? Okay, yeah, barely, yeah. So nearly, just under, almost, barely is another really good one, Laura, that you can use. Yeah, about and approximately, roughly, around, those are all really good words to use for the approximate language, okay? All right, now we'll have a look at our second body paragraph. So we've done the 3 biggest groups, now we're going to do the 3 smallest groups, okay? It's logical way of dividing up the information. You can't use had with numbers, okay? You can use were or made up or represented or accounted for, but don't use the verb to have to introduce numbers, okay? So similar kind of exercise here. We need to have a look. Yeah. So we're linking between the first group and the second group by saying that these are much smaller. So we have a connection there between paragraph A and paragraph B. All right. Then we go into our details. So we talk about North Africa and the Middle East. Okay. And here, with the very small percentages, just put the percentage. It's not really worth saying, 100th or something like that. That just starts to get a bit silly. Okay, and then, yes, okay, down to the smallest was the Americans, and they represented just 3%. Okay, so very small percentages, just keep them as they are. Okay. So looking a little bit more at the language here. So in terms of making comparisons, what kind of language do we have there for making comparisons? Okay, good. So yeah, we've got the smaller, and then we've also got smallest. So using comparatives, using superlatives, you know, that kind of language is going to be very, very important with the pie charts, with the static charts. And okay, we've got our 4 and our 3%. So just to make sure that we're still using some language, what have we put in front of those small numbers to show that they are very small numbers? Okay, Amir, that would be very nice, yeah. Okay, so we've gone for only or just, but Amir is very nice, Anna, that works very well. Only, just, those kind of words, okay. So we're still, you know, adding in different ways of talking about it there. All right. Okay. So we have now, I can show you the full answer. Okay, so introductory sentence, overview, and then 2 body paragraphs. Overview contains only the key information. Body paragraphs contain the detail, which are supported with the data, the exact data. Okay. So put your key features in your overview. Introductory sentence is simply a paraphrase of the question. Make sure you've got a clear overview, as we talked about before, and make sure that you've got a logical progression going through. Everything should link to what's gone before. So, you know, starting with the largest, moving down to the second largest, ending on the smallest, you know, it's quite easy to make a logical connection between those. Don't use, if it's in percentages, don't just write the percentage. Paraphrase, use fractions, use ratios if you can, but be careful with the ratios. Fractions always work. Use approximate language, and make sure that you have lots of comparative language in order to show the relationship between the different figures. Okay, thank you. And I really do apologize for falling apart slightly there in the middle of the presentation.
Awesome. Well done, Annalie. Thank you very much for the presentation. And yeah, well done for soldiering on through throat problems. You did great. So yeah, and thank you guys. Well done for your answers and your suggestions and a lot of your questions as well, which I've been helping to answer in the Q&A as Annalie's been presenting. So thank you for those. We do now have some time to answer any other questions you have, whether it's general questions about the Ielts test or anything about writing task 1. Feel free to add your questions to the Q&A and we will discuss them in a moment. And thank you for that very nice feedback, guys. I'm glad you found it helpful and enjoyable. So excellent. Guys, before we go into your questions, I would just like to do a bit of promotion for our speaking and writing evaluation service, which we offer on our website, ieltsonlinetest.com. So if you are interested in getting feedback on your writing, you can submit it via our website to our team of qualified writing examiners. One of the team will look through your writing, they will give you feedback, they'll correct any mistakes that you're making, and we can also give you an estimated band score in each of the different criteria. So that will help you get an idea of which areas of the test you need to focus on, which areas you need to improve to get the score that you need. So I've put the link to that in the chat. we have a similar service available for speaking as well. You can book a mock speaking test with a qualified speaking examiner, and they'll give you face-to-face feedback on your speaking. So this can be really helpful for you, especially if you're planning to take the test soon. You can get some feedback there. Yes, Sam, you're asking about teaching academic IELTS. We have various courses on our website. If you want to drop us an email via the site, we can give you more information. We have a series of video lessons as well called IELTS Explained, which focus on reading and listening. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out on our website. Okay, so right, guys, I can see quite a few of your questions. If you can pop them into the Q&A, we'll hop over there and we'll start answering them just now. Okay, so let's see. All right, Annalie, how's the voice? Are you recovered?
It's getting there.
You were going to say you could go out and get some tea or something before.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We've got question here from Zuldiz. Sorry if I'm not saying your name right, Zuldiz, but they are asking, is it required to write the percentage in words, or can I use figures as well? So I guess that's the percent, like the actual word.
Yeah, the actual figure. Yeah, you can write it in figures. That's perfectly fine. We tend to write the very small numbers out as words. But you know, for example, 62%, yeah, you would definitely write that as a figure. There's no point writing it out as words. You know, you might make a spelling mistake for one thing, which obviously you're not going to make if you write figures. So that is completely fine.
Yeah, and hopefully that answers your question as well, Safa. Should we write the numbers in letters, or does it count as words? My understanding is that every symbol you write counts as one word. So if you write a dollar symbol or a percentage symbol, that will count as a one word. So it's fine. You can choose to write it as in full, like words, or you can write it as a symbol too. Let's see. Interesting question here from Anonymous. Don't we have to write a conclusion for task 1? So I'll throw that one over to you, Annalie, and we can have a discussion about it, because there are different views on this, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, you could write maybe one line of conclusion at the end just to sum it up and bring it together. What's important is that you don't include any opinion or analysis, that you're not bringing in other pieces of information from outside that maybe you happen to know. It's not a task to essay. But the most important thing is to have the overview and to have picked out the main trends. That is really, really key.
Yeah, exactly. There are different structures you can use. I know that some teachers suggest writing a conclusion, and that's where they would put their overview, essentially. For us, we've chosen to put the overview in the second paragraph, because it kind of makes it jump out for the examiner. It makes it very clear, and you're moving from general to specific, which is quite a nice logical kind of organization. You could, arguably have one sentence at the end, summarizing again the main trends, but you're kind of risking repeating yourself as well. So yeah, as Annalie said, it's not essential, but if you've been taught and practiced the structure, it's fine as well. You wouldn't lose marks. So let's see, question from Romain. Romain is asking, is there any equivalence between IELTS and Toeic scores?
I'm not particularly familiar with Toeic. I am fairly familiar with TOEFL, but Toeic, I'm honestly just not that familiar with. So Jamie, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I'm
help
similar
me.
actually. I'm more familiar with TOEFL, and I know that it's, you know, there are kind of equivalent bands roughly between Ielts and Toeic. I'm just having a quick look here. I found a table that says for an IELTS band 7, the equivalent TOEIC score would be 945 to 965. So yes, there is an equivalence there. However, it may be that depending on what you're taking the test for, you might need to take one or the other. You know, some universities, they require IELTS, specifically the IELTS test. If it's a visa, then it might be, you might need the IELTS VI visa rather than the TOEIC test. So check with the organization, the institution you're applying for. That will, they'll be able to tell you which test you need to take. Okay, great. Let's see, and thanks for the question, because I think we both just learned something there as well. So
I'm going to look it up now.
yeah, let's see. Sappho, we answered your question. Jessica is asking about the computer delivered one. Can I ask for a piece of paper in the reading exam if I'm doing the computer delivered test? I'm not sure what, I think we got some feedback from one of our students who did this, Annalie, which was that they'd given when you take the computer delivered test, they will give you a piece of paper with your name and your login details on it. So you can use that to take notes for the reading and for the writing as well.
Yeah, you can write, you know, you do get a piece of rough paper, don't you, that you can make some notes on.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you should be able to use that. Okay, let's see. Okay, this one is from Rahil, and it's about task 1. So Rahil would like to know, sometimes we're asked about comparisons. How can we make comparisons effectively? How can we do effective comparisons in writing task 1?
Well, you need to have a variety of language. That's the most important thing. You don't want to just be repeating the same form all the time. I think, as we've done here, a good strategy to have is to start with the largest number and then work your way down to the smallest number, because then it's quite easy to link, you know, things like the second largest, or, you know, slightly less than this is with, you know, whatever percentage. It makes it a lot easier to do that than if you're kind of picking numbers out.
Definitely. Yeah, I think those sort of comparative and superlative forms as well, larger than, the largest, the smallest, you know, yeah, can help as well. So let's see. Anonymous is asking about the webinars on YouTube. Anonymous, we've had a couple of technical issues with uploading them, but they should be going up. This one should be up on YouTube in the next couple of days. So yeah, you should be able to review it very soon. Okay. Islam is asking, can we show the first page? Which page is that, Islam? Let us know. We will.
With the first practice graph, that one?
Maybe the question, yeah, not sure. We'll wait and hear back from you, okay? Okay, yes, here we go. So while we're looking for that, Agam has a question about paraphrasing, which is, I can't think of a paraphrase for every word. And when I see the question, I try to change all the words, and I don't know how to link them. So any advice for Agam about how to paraphrase more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to paraphrase every word. I think that's the first thing. You know, it's not an exercise in paraphrasing. What you need to do is make some changes so that you're not just copying out the question as it appears on the question paper. So just think about, you know, if you can use, you know, a couple, 2 or 3 synonyms, and remember that there are also other ways of paraphrasing. It's not just finding synonyms, but if you can just change the word order a little bit, or if you can change the word formation a little bit, use an adjective rather than a noun. You know, so we had immigration, and we had immigrant, and we had immigrating. So that's 3 different forms. Same word, but you know, you're changing the type of word rather than looking for a synonym. But you know, you definitely don't need to paraphrase everything. That you know, that's I think you're causing yourself stress. That's not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add, like you could also try using a relative clause as well, changing the word order. So, you know, instead of saying the immigration of foreign workers, you could say, you know, workers who have immigrated into Australia. So changing the adjective and using it in a relative clause there is one good way to change it without having to find a synonym necessarily. Good. Let's see, this is a good question from Ornicha, who is asking, is it necessary to put the data like a percentage in every sentence?
In the body paragraphs, yeah, you know, you're unlikely to have a sentence without a piece of data in that. It's really important to support your language with the exact. They are looking for that as well. You may have a kind of introductory sentence, but I doubt it. So I think you're going to have percentages and figures, fractions in, you know, in pretty much all of your sentences.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's worth, you know, practicing different ways of introducing those numbers, whether it's saying, you know, the percentage began at, you know, X percent, rising to, you know, Y percent. This is, you know, a nice way to integrate the percentage into your sentence. So using those prepositions, beginning at, rising to, reaching a peak of, that can help you. You know, a few forms like that will help you introduce the language. You can also put them in brackets as well, just for variety. Good. So let's see. Elisabetta has a question about the academic and general Ielts test. What's the difference, basically?
Okay, well, the purpose is different for a start. Normally, you need the academic if you are going to study in an English-speaking country, but there are some jobs that require the academic, and general training is generally for immigration. Okay. The most important thing is that whoever you are working with, that you know what they want, and you do the right module for the requirement of, you know, the health service or the immigration or the university that you are applying to. There's some differences. The task 1 is completely different. The reading is a little bit different. The listening and the speaking are exactly the same.
Yeah, Fantastic. Thanks for that overview, Annalie. So guys, I'm afraid we are about to run out of time for this lesson, so we're going to have to wrap up there. So I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Annalie for presenting and soldiering on through delivery issues.
So sorry.
It was great, and thank you guys for joining us for the lesson today. It's been a lot of fun, so thank you. Just to say, I know some of you still have some questions open in the Q&A. If we haven't answered your question, you can add them as comments on our YouTube channel. You can send them in via Facebook as well. If you could check out our YouTube channel and like the video, if you could subscribe to our channel, that would be even better. It really helps us to keep offering these webinars, so we appreciate it. And yeah, thank you guys for staying up so late for our lesson. And good luck if you have your test coming up. Janet, I saw that you have your test very soon. I hope this session's been useful for you. Okay, so yeah, so again, thank you very much. Cheers, Annalie. And
good luck, Lion, tomorrow. Got the test tomorrow. Bye everybody, good luck, take care. Bye bye. Bye Jessica.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care guys. Bye. See you, Jamie.
Bye.
Safe trips. Yeah.
Yeah.